to that place and buy it. When in reality, nobody knows you exist, or maybe a few people do. They don't know about your new product or service. And they're not necessarily automatically going to where you're putting it out for sale. So invest in your marketing and your sales and be deliberate about it. Don't leave it to chance. I've lived and worked enough years in West Africa to understand that it's very difficult for many of you as businesses, particularly smaller ones, to have extra money in your business. I understand that in many communities and many families, there's a tremendous pressure for you when your cousin wants to have a baptism for the child, or your brother needs to build a new house, or your sister gets sick, or your parent gets sick, then to a very high level, so that those periods where your sales are low, or where you have a real unexpected downturn like the airlines had in the United States in September 2001, that you have more cash on reserve to help you get through those tough times. And you will be a better candidate for a loan. You will be more interesting to a bank as a potential borrower if you have more cash in your business to keep it running successfully from one month to the next. How much money do you have in your business? Do you have the equivalent of $50,000, $10,000, $1,000? How much you need to have on hand at any given time will vary with the size of your business. But many experts say that a small business should have at least 1 year of operating expenses on hand in cash reserves in a bank account at any given time. 1 year of operating expenses. That means the cost of the mortgage or the cost of the rent, the cost of the utilities, the cost of fuel if you have a delivery truck, the cost of paying your staff and paying yourself, the cost of buying the raw materials you need and of doing the advertising and the marketing expenses. 1 year's worth of that expense is what most experts will tell you as a small business you should have on hand. I would imagine if I asked how many of you have that much on hand, there would be at most a very few hands that would go up in this room. However, you should set that as a goal, and maybe your first step is to get to have 2 weeks of operating expenses on hand in cash reserves. And work toward this goal of 1 year of operating expenses. Okay, types of funding. There are two types of funding, two basic types of funding. Equity funding, which means in exchange for money that gets invested into your business, or that is provided to you to invest in your business, you hand over part of the ownership of your business. Share companies, what we call in the U.S. stocks of a company. If I buy stock in a company, I'm taking an equity position in that company. I'm exchanging money for a partial ownership in that company, even if it's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of ownership. Some of you have heard of angel investors. An angel investor will take a share of your company in exchange for putting money into it. A silent partner they'll put money in, they'll own part of the company, but they'll stay silent. They'll let you manage it the way you want. We're not going to talk really about equity financing because that's not what most of you need information about here. What we're going to focus on is the debt financing or loan. However, for small businesses, not all banks will lend to small businesses. I can tell you, however, something I learned this just in the last couple of days, the Bank of Industry that is sponsoring this workshop for you today and tomorrow has just announced that they are getting ready to launch a microfinance program. So where in the past the Bank of Industry may not have been a particularly suitable lender for many of your small businesses, in the future they may in fact be much more willing to entertain a loan application from you. And in fact, at this workshop, they're actually passing out loan applications. And we'll have a representative of the bank who can answer questions a little bit later this afternoon, I believe. But banks are certainly one source of debt financing. In some cases, governments will offer small business loans or guarantees for small business loans. The U.S. government does that. I'm not sure about the Nigerian government yet, or your state governments, but I do know that the governments are putting money into this microfinance fund so that the Bank of Industry will be able to offer microcredit. Microcredit lenders, microcredit institutions are another option, particularly for the very small borrowers or the very small companies. Suppliers. This is a source of credit that many companies just don't think about. That if you are buying something either to resell or to transform and sell, whether it's raw materials or whether it's finished goods, you can ask your supplier for credit. You can ask your supplier if instead of paying on delivery, if you can have 30 days to pay, or 60 days, or 90 days. Now, they will not always say yes, but you can ask, and some of them will, particularly if you have a good long-term relationship with them. You a little bit of credit initially, and if you adhere to those terms well, then may expand it. But suppliers can be a good option. Credit cards. Credit cards are not yet widely available here in Nigeria, but increasingly they are and will be more so in the future. And I know some of you have credit cards from overseas banks. You do it, but it is a possibility. Friends and family as lenders or as investors. Friends and family can be a very important, very good source of credit. If your family members or your friends have money that they're willing to invest in you, I do urge you caution. If you borrow from your friends or your family, treat it as the business transaction it is. This is not a, gee, he's my friend and he's loaning me $5,000 and, I'll pay it back whenever I want to because he's my friend and he's really nice and so on and so forth. Treat it like a business transaction for your sake and your friend or your family members' sake, and adhere to it as a business transaction. Write out a loan agreement. How much are you borrowing? What is the percent interest that you will pay? When will you pay it? What if you don't repay it? And both of you sign it and adhere to it. Small business to get a loan. It's very, very difficult. I think all of you can probably tell me stories about it. However, there are things you can do to improve your chances of getting a loan. First of all, calculate your needs. Your startup needs if you're just a business getting started, or your expansion needs if you're getting ready to expand, and your ongoing operations. But calculate how much cash you need for your business. Research and identify potential loans, potential sources of credit. I mentioned that there are banks, there are microfinance institutions, there may be government loans available to you, banks that also lend to businesses, or at least consider lending to businesses of your size, or in your industry, or your sector. Write a list of all of what's the minimum size and the maximum size loan that you extend. What are your requirements for lending to businesses of my size and in my industry? Do that for every one of your potential sources that you have identified, and then sit down and look at that. And the ones that, if a bank only offers loans starting at the equivalent of $500,000 and up, and you're a little business and to you a big loan is the equivalent of $3,000, just scratch that bank off the list. There's no sense in beating your head against a wall and saying, but they won't give me a loan. Just like you, they have their target market. Identify those banks that are willing and able to lend to smaller clients. Look at those. Look at the other opportunities. Identify those. Of all of the ones that you initially identified, pick out the ones that best match your needs and the size of your business. Then ask for loan applications. Start with the one that you think is most likely. Ask for 2 loan applications, 2 copies of it. Does anybody have an idea why I encourage you to ask for not 1 blank application but 2?
If really did you make a mistake?
Smart man. Most of us, the first time we fill out long, detailed application forms and so forth, usually make a mistake or 2. One of the keys to your getting a loan from that bank is you being able to build confidence in the banker that you are a good business person and that they will be able to get their money back if they lend to you. If you hand in an application and you've scratched things out and you've written in the margins and so forth, are they going to think that you're careful and you're detail-oriented and you've been very, very deliberate in the way you fill this out? They're probably going to think you were in a bit of a hurry, or you were kind of sloppy, or you really didn't take much care. Those are marks against you if you're trying to get a loan. So I encourage you, get 2 blank copies, put one aside someplace that it will stay neat and clean. Work on the other one when you finally have all the questions answered, you've done all the calculations, you've gone through everything, and you feel like you've really answered it to the best of your ability and you've answered it fully. Then pull out that clean one and rewrite the information very neatly on the clean one and hand in the clean one. Gather the supporting documents. Every time you go for a loan, you're going to have to provide some supporting documents. As a small business, you're probably going to have to show things like ownership documents for your business and business registrations. If you have fixed assets, a building, a vehicle, some particularly large expensive equipment, you're probably going to have to show titles or ownership deeds for those. And records of the income you've had and your balance sheet and income statements and so forth, all things that your accountant can do for you, or now you can do on the computer yourself with some accounting software. Yourself as an individual, because you're a small business and that bank is really lending to your company, but also they look at it as lending to you as well. So before you even submit that loan document, make sure that you get all these things and that you're able to, you make photocopies of everything and you're able to hand to the bank or to that potential lender a full package of everything they need to make a good decision. Schedule an appointment. You say, but you know, my bank's not that busy. I can just walk in Thursday afternoon and sit down and say, I want to get a loan. Here's my application. You might be able to do that, but I encourage you to schedule an appointment in advance for 2 reasons. One, remember I said that part of getting that bank loan is convincing the banker that you're a professional, that you plan ahead, that you're well organized. Scheduling an appointment and then keeping that appointment will help give the banker that kind of impression of you. The other thing is that then you know you have the appointment and it allows you to go back and really prepare for that appointment. And what you want to do is you really want to prepare. Sure, you've filled out the loan application, you've gotten all these other documents together. That's not the end of the preparation. You need to think about how in a few short sentences you can explain your business idea and your product and service and the need that it fills to that potential lender. You have about 5 to 7 seconds, not minutes, not hours, 5 to 7 seconds to capture that banker's attention If you don't, in that 5 to 7 seconds, capture that banker's attention, you don't get the loan. If you capture that banker's attention in that first 5 to 7 seconds, that buys you a couple of minutes to speak a little bit longer. If you don't continue to hold that banker's attention in that next couple of minutes, you don't get the loan. You literally buy a little bit of that person's attention at a time. 5 to 7 seconds. 5 seconds is the time it takes to count 5,001, 5,002, 5,003, 5,004, 5,005. That's how much time you have to capture that banker's attention. So if you go in and say, "Hello, Mr. Smith. I want to talk to you about a loan, and you know, I just came in because, well, I saw that you were in your office, and you know, I need $20,000. They're already thinking about what they're going to have for dinner. If you go in and you say, you introduce yourself and you say, you know, I've got an existing business, we've been in business for 10 years, and I feel that there's an opportunity in the market that's not being met. And I'd like to talk to you about a product that I want to develop to fill that market need." I would go, "Oh, hey, maybe I should listen to this person. And I'll give you, in my own mind, I'll give you another minute or two. Then you can tell me what that product is, what the need is, what the product is, and I'll go, gee, you know, this person is really thinking. Let me listen some more. This sounds like it might be a good business idea." So you want to think, we talk in the United States about sound bites, which are literally about 2 words that, you know, you either get somebody's attention or you don't. Think how you can very quickly communicate your idea to that banker in a way that will be interesting to that banker. Think about what questions that banker is likely to ask you. And if you're not sure, hire an accountant for 30 minutes and say, "Tell me what questions is a banker going to ask me if I go for a loan?" And that accountant, if it's a good accountant, will be able to say, "They're going to ask you this, 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 and this." Write down those questions and think about the answers and write down the answers and be prepared to answer them quickly. Think also about what questions you want to ask the banker. What might you want to ask a banker if you're going in for a loan?
What is the interest rate?
Good. What's the interest rate? It's an important thing to know. What's another question? I've got somebody from way back.
What is the collateral that is expected of me?
Good. What's the collateral? We've got one over here.
What is the payback period?
Okay. What's the payback period? Good one. Okay.
Duration for the period of payment.
6-day duration for the period of repayment, or the payback period. Okay, these are some of the questions you want to ask, and there may be more questions that you want to ask as well. But my point is, sit down ahead of time, once you've scheduled that appointment, and before you go in for the appointment, write down the questions that you want to ask the banker. Take that list of questions with you, so that if the banker says, "Gee, I'll consider this," that you can then say, "I'd like to ask you a few questions as well," and you have those questions in front of you. It shows the banker that, again, you're thinking like a good manager, like a business person, like an entrepreneur, and you're taking this all very seriously. Okay, and then what to do if you're turned down. Many of you will be turned down. Certainly the first time you apply. Many of you have been turned down already. I'd like to talk about that, but I think we have lunch waiting for us. So what I'd like to do, what I'd like to suggest is that we go ahead and have lunch. But incidentally, I do want to say, one of the gentlemen in the audience came up to me, backtracking a little bit, one of the gentlemen in the audience came up to me when we were taking a break just now and said, you know, I wanted to tell you that now I understand about Walmart. I went in their stores 2 months ago, and he said I wanted to buy some things, and he said I'd also gone to Target and some of the other stores nearby, and he said, you're right, those other stores are more expensive for the same things. And I said, which stores are fancier? And he said, you're right, those other stores are. He said, now I understand a lot more about Walmart. So, just to corroborate what I've been telling you. Anyway, back to the loan terms. There are a number of things that you want to find out about a loan before you sign the papers for that money. You need to agree with the bank on, agree with the bank on the amount of the loan. You may go in and say, I need 50,000 Naira, and they may say, well, we've looked at your application, we hear what you're saying, but we're only willing to give you 20,000 Naira. Or they may say, and then you talk a bit, and you either agree to 20,000 or 30,000, or maybe you agree to 50,000. Or you may be lucky and you may say, I want a loan for $50,000 Naira, and they may agree to the 50,000 Naira, but ultimately you have to agree on the amount of the loan. You also need to agree, as one of the gentlemen up here told us before we took the break, you need to find out about the interest. And you want to ask a couple of key questions about the interest, because there are different methods of calculating interest. I'm not going to go into the calculation itself, because that calculation is not as important as understanding how much money you're going to have to pay. And if we could all turn our cell phones off again, please. And it's 5% simple interest. That's very different how much you pay in total percentage rate. When you talk to a lending institution about a loan and you're talking about interest rates, if they say it's 5% simple interest or it's 10% compound interest, whatever interest they say it is, ask, what is the APR? What is the annual percentage rate? Every lender that you talk with about a loan, ask the APR if you're comparing a loan with one institution to a loan with another. Because or even if you're comparing different types of loans within one institution, that's the only way that you will know if you're comparing a mango to a pineapple or a mango to a mango. So you also need to know the repayment period. How long do you have the use of that money? How often do you have to make loan repayments? And how much do you have to repay each time? And that's information you then have to factor into your cash flow analysis to make sure that you'll have enough money each month to make that repayment. Most loans that you would have access to will have a monthly repayment. Some of them may have small repayments at the beginning and what's called a balloon payment or a very large payment at the end. You need to be very careful with those. They can be quite seductive because you look at it and you say, oh, I only have to pay a little bit back the first 3 years. Oh yeah, at the end of 3 years I'll have the rest of that money to pay the rest back. And then they're starting to have some problems now. So I just urge you to find out exactly what the repayment schedule is for your loan. Collateral. One of the gentlemen in the back mentioned this morning that collateral is something that you need to ask about when you're getting a loan, and that's very true. There is no responsible lending organization that will just simply hand over the money and not have to have some sort of guarantee. In the case of a bank, they may require that you have a certain amount of cash in a bank account, in their bank, probably. I actually have heard, unfortunately, in West Africa, elsewhere in West Africa, some banks requiring that you have more in cash reserves in their bank account than the amount of the loan that you're asking for. which to me makes no sense, and to most people makes no sense, except maybe the bankers, because if you already have that much money, if you have more than that much money, you're probably not going to be asking them to borrow in the first place. However, that's what one particular bank decided to do. I don't think they've been very successful with it. However, every responsible lending entity will expect to have some sort of collateral. It may be cash in a bank account that you're not allowed to access until that loan is repaid. It might be the deed to a factory, the ownership papers to a factory or to a vehicle. It might be the title to your personal house or to your Mercedes-Benz, if you happen to have a Mercedes-Benz. Does your credit history play a big role in whether you're able to get a loan or not? Particularly if you're going to a commercial bank for a loan. And your credit history is simply any experience that you have had previously with getting a loan, and get a loan for your business or a loan for you as an individual, or if your business partners have, you have a history of either having repaid, made all those payments on time, having repaid the loan as you agreed. It's going to want to know about it, and it's going to check to see whether you repaid on schedule as you agreed. It will be much more difficult for you to get a loan. A loan from a bank. And rightfully so, because you're not as good a credit risk. There's a greater chance that you will default on a future loan. One of the things that in the United States we tell young people who are just starting out on their own and who want to be able to buy a car and are going to need to take out a bank loan to buy a car, or who want to buy a house and are going to take out a mortgage, but have not established a credit history, we often tell them to go buy something small on credit, pay it back properly, and then go and ask for the bank loan. You build that credibility with the banker. And negotiate. All of you in front of me are the kings and queens of negotiation. You as West Africans know in your heart and your soul and your mind and your DNA how to negotiate. Nothing that is absolutely set in concrete about the terms of a bank loan. By law, you probably have some limits on how much interest the bank can charge. In the United States, we have limits. We have usury laws that say that commercial lenders cannot charge more than a certain % interest. And there may be a few other banking regulations and so forth, but for the most part, the terms of a loan are negotiable. The banks aren't going to advertise that to you. But in fact, if you are a good credit risk, and if you have a good, interesting business idea that's appealing to that banker, you're in a good position to negotiate. What do you negotiate? How much money you can get for the loan. I said a few minutes ago, you may ask for 50,000 Naira. They may say, we'll give you 20,000 Naira. At the end of the negotiation, you may walk out of the bank with 48,000. Maybe you're not quite as high as you wanted to be, but you're certainly higher than where they started. Maybe they tell you that they are going to charge you 18% APR for your interest rate. And you can say, well, if I put down another $1,000 worth of collateral, can we bring that interest rate down? Or if I agree to make slightly higher repayments each month, can you give me a better interest rate? And finally, repayment or default. The absolute worst thing that you can do once you get a loan is to not pay it back. That will ruin your reputation as a business person. It can get legal action against you. You will still actually be responsible for the cost of the loan, but it will make doing business many more times difficult than it already is for you. The most honest business person, despite working on a business plan, having a good idea, really working hard, saving, doing all the right things, sometimes things happen that make it extremely difficult for you to make a loan payment. If you just sort of sweep it under the carpet, act like it didn't happen, just kind of ignore the fact that you're supposed to pay the loan on the 15th of the month and it's the 14th and you don't have the money, and it's the 15th and you don't have the money, just sort of avoid walking past the bank, and then it's the 18th and then the 20th and then it's the next month, and you send somebody else to the bank because you don't want to face the banker. Trust me, that banker knows. That banker is not forgetting. Just because you act like it didn't happen doesn't mean that the banker will act like it didn't happen. The banker will notice. The banker is not in business to drive you out of business. Money. Just like if your customers don't pay you, it's harder for you to make money. It's the same thing for the bank. The bank, once the bank gives you a loan, the bank wants you to succeed every bit as much as you want to succeed, maybe even more, because they want their money back. If you see that you are going to have problems meeting a payment, please go to your banker in advance, schedule an appointment, sit down with your banker and say, I'm really sorry, but I don't know how I'm going to be able to make this next payment. Can you work with me? I'm supposed to pay 1,000 naira. I'm not going to have 1,000 naira. Can I pay 500 naira and 2 weeks later pay the other 500? Or it's going to be longer. This is what happened that I could not have foreseen, I could not have prevented. This is how I've handled it. It wasn't on you taking your house, trying to sell your house and get the money back, and trying to show the banker that you're trying to find a solution and that you're asking the banker to work with you. The better odds that you will be able to come to a solution that both you and the banker can live with. Despite your best efforts, please don't sweep it under the counter, under the carpet. Don't act like it hasn't happened. Please be honest with them, and be honest as early as you can with your lender, and work together to find a solution. Okay, some common reasons for decline. As I said, we were going to talk about what happens if you get declined. What are some of the big reasons why you get declined? Well, if you have an incomplete, a sloppy, or an erroneous or fraudulent application, I suggested that you get how many copies of the loan application? Two, yeah. Just so that you can avoid this first mistake. It's a really simple one to avoid. Do a rough draft of your loan application, fill in all the blanks first. Once you've been able to fill in everything fully, then transfer the information to the clean application so that you have a nice, neat, clean application to turn in. If there are questions on the loan application that you don't know how to answer, talk with your banker. Ask them if they would explain it to you. Or hire an accountant and ask the accountant to help you with it. Even if you hire that accountant for a couple of hours, you don't have to hire an accountant full-time. You can hire an accountant on an as-needed basis, a couple hours here, a couple hours there, a few days here, a few days there. But if there's something that you don't understand, one of the questions you don't understand or you don't know how to answer it, ask for some professional help so that you can give the correct answer. Please don't ever falsify information because the bank will find out. And the instant that the bank finds that something is fraudulent in your application, they won't even consider a loan for you now or any time in the future, because they will no longer consider you an honest business person, nor should they. Underdeveloped business idea. This is quite a common mistake, especially with new businesses or with fairly inexperienced entrepreneurs. Sometimes with experienced entrepreneurs, but new ideas. The bank may say, you know, that's kind of interesting, but I don't think you've thought about it enough. More. This is where you go back to that business plan right at the very beginning, and you work through that whole business plan again. More. Unrealistic sales forecasts. Talked quite a bit about that this morning, and that's quite a common error, especially among new businesses. Quite common for a small business to decide that they really have to have this big factory building. They really need this fancy new vehicle to deliver their goods, or for the owner to look important when he or she drives around town. Or in that retail shop they're opening, they really have to have fancy display fixtures. Who's the gentleman who was at Walmart? Were the display fixtures where the garments were hanging and the products displayed, were they fancy?
Well, just normal display of goods and things in the show.
Pretty simple displays, right? Small businesses feel like they have to do the fanciest, most decorative, most elaborate, newest, whatever. If you're purchasing a vehicle, a delivery vehicle, for instance, do you really need a new 4x4 truck to get your goods from point A to point B? Or can you find a good, serviceable, second-hand vehicle that is in good mechanical condition, that maybe doesn't look as fancy but works just as well and costs you a lot less money? The bank will ask you that. Inflated salaries. This is another one that the bankers will look very closely at. If you're starting a business, or you've been in business a little while and you're expanding it, but you know, you're going to a bank for loan because you need someone else's money to help you build a business, they're going to look at how much you're paying yourself. Are you driving that fancy Mercedes around town? And are you giving yourself a fat salary? They're probably going to be much harder, look at you much more critically than if you're giving yourself a very modest salary so that you can put as much back into the business as you can. So this is an area that the bankers look at very, very closely. Insufficient owner investment. A gentleman last week asked me about investing in a business, not me personally investing, but he said, you know, the bank tells me that I have to have all this money in the bank and I have to put all this money into my business before they'll give me a loan. But, you know, I don't have that money to put in I don't have any money to put into my business. But they won't give me a loan. I said, you know something? If you're not putting any money into your business, I wouldn't give you a loan either. Why? Because giving you a loan is taking a business risk with you. That potential lender is taking a risk that you will, in fact, be successful in your business so that you can repay that loan. If you have a lot to lose, if your business fails, are you going to work hard? Yes, I think most of you work very hard. If you have nothing to lose, and you start getting tired, want to take a vacation, are you going to work as hard? Probably not. If you have nothing invested or very little invested in your business, you have much less of what we call a vested interest in making sure your business succeeds. And who, when things are a little bit rough, decides to take the day off. Have very little invested of your own money and your own assets invested in that business. X amount in your business, and then come back to me and we can talk. Finally, lack of industry experience. If you come to me and you tell me that you want to start a pharmaceutical company and make medicines, say, okay, you know, we can talk. Tell me about your idea. tell me about your company. And I'll say, tell me about your experience. Have you worked in the pharmaceutical industry? Have you worked for a pharmaceutical manufacturer before? Well, no, I sold paint. Okay. Do you have a business partner who is knowledgeable about the pharmaceutical industry, has experience in that industry? Well, no, I want to start this up myself, but I hear that there's a real need for antiretroviral drugs, and so, and the patents are being lifted and so forth, and so I want to start a pharmaceutical company and make ARVs. I'm not going to give you a bank loan if you don't have any interest, if you don't have any solid experience in the industry you're talking about in most cases. In a very few instances I might, but very, very few. Because lack of experience is one of the main reasons that small businesses fail. And I'm not in business as a bank to fail. I'm in business as a bank to make money and to succeed. Okay, you came, you did all the things that I've suggested so far. You did a nice, neat application. You were thorough in it. You brought all the extra documents. You made the appointment. First thing that you might do.
Problem? No way.
Okay, you heard it from the bank. That won't solve the problem. If I were the banker, it wouldn't make me any more convinced to give you a loan. It would make me glad I hadn't given you the loan. First thing that you should do if you get turned down, if you get declined a loan, is ask why. Not to be belligerent, not to be angry, not to beat up the loan officer, but to understand what the reasons were. And explain that to them. Say, thank you, I'm sorry that wasn't the decision that I wanted, but I really would like to understand the reasons so that I know what I can do better in my business in order to be able to access the cash that I need. Ask what the reasons were and ask the banker if he or she has recommendations for you. Maybe they'll say,